Welcome to day 106, and I'm so glad that you have joined me here today. Lesson 92. Today, allow the light directly to express and shine from this appearance onto the world freely. When the shadows vanish, do not become discouraged and by the disengagements that would otherwise involve the self to play in, with, today's affirmation. I must release my sentiment from all objects of attachment. I must release my sentiment from all objects of attachment. I must release my sentiment from all objects of attachment. Acceptance is not dependent on its recognition. To be allowed for its expression to be proven first. Where's the light? Oh, is her heart not open enough to bring it in? And then, by proving it first and then expressed accordingly, nor be explicitly enforced the pattern and for the need to have it in an objectifying manner. Objects must not be to possess the self with, nor the self to addictify them, and as a need to function. This neediness, attachments to function with, the need for me to have the light in order to be noticed. We are not allies of the light. We are the light. We are the light. And when someone says otherwise, beware of hell-bound notions that speak of alliances to duplicate. Oh, delirium way. So the root of all suffering comes from these identifiable ideas that hold into identity and as solid objects, if you will. So easy to get lost in the reassurance that the self might be worth for anything less otherwise. hanging on to things for value, to support the self as worthy. And now it's gone internet. You know, how many websites can you afford? How many linkages and how many this and that in social media? And to serve in its expression is as silly as the references and resume it has experience to prove with. And then it goes competitive. So, is it a business, or are we just ordained into some kind of religion? Are we making a mockery out of spirituality? Relying on the world to hold its ransom will indeed hold the self back and proves nothing in the making of itself. Could it be the purpose of not having made it in the first place? Made it into what? What are we making? What's for dinner? See? Is it not this neglect that the self must realize that in fact it has, and the supporting figures are irrelevant? How many followers is quantity, and then there's quality, and then there's a whole bunch of rubbish in between. And so, with that said, is it business? What are we being busy about? And then the boundaries and exclusiveness and all these other things. From every object, subject, place, and so on. That the self must have hold and cherish. Are they not the neglected aspects held captive? And today, take everything that is held precious to the self and study it. Study it as the many things and places the self might be holding in ransom of its energy and from itself as light. Feel the sentiment and allow to detach from this or any other meaning that might hold led to its addiction in this way of holding on to all patterns. Do not go without the sentimental addiction to them, and that had kept attached the self on them. I must release myself and all the sentiment I hold from all objects of attachment. The masks or cover-ups must be released, and in the same way as it was mentioned from the previous lesson as to perhaps express the unawareness held within the grief. The unawareness held within the grief, the echoes of emotions held within a prison, held within a rectangular box, because what I'm thinking is it Pythagoras? Who was it? Well, another day, another channel. Today Pythagoras is not going to happen. And so these things might be a way to claim more space or ownership. So when I get more belongings, I have to stretch into another and more and more. Like we discussed before with different perspectives of when we were doing blowing bubbles and doing these practices of circles and wheels and seeing how many words we can focus. But when we expand this way with these objects in the way, this clutter, it's in hopes that we will expand some more. Or are we in fact just downsizing and must get rid of these things? In this moment of expression, it's to expand. This is why, because normally we do have the space, and that's why we buy these things. So either way, whether it be back or forth or front or back. So could it be that all these toys make the self feel grandiose? Is the self feeling very small to begin with? Is it overcompensating for its emotional awkwardness? Does it feel the box? Does it feel it caving in on it? The walls start closing in, the ceiling getting smaller. And I'm thinking isosceles triangle. Anyway, the kind of triangle that creates not a box, but a rectangle. And when you slide them, like shift them, like rotate them, and then spin them like a Merkaba, what would happen is they turn into an oval, egg shape. Or that is us, our soul. And so this is alchemy. And so again, I'm just kind of in subtle ways putting these kind of practices that you might want to get very motivated to kind of experiment with. It's not in the book, mind you. And could it be the loss, the way to? Maybe the attachments is to an underlying fear of separation and or an abandonment. Could it be the loss was way too sudden and before the self could even reconcile with it properly, to go away or doing without it? Storing things away like clothing or even extra weight because of having to remember, and that the moderation is not restored to balance with extreme behavior. So how much can our nerves take? The adipose, the fat tissue, helps hold in the toxins that we must deal with. And so fat can be a good thing too. It helps with our nervous system. Oh dear. And so, are we descending or are we ascending? Okay, let's go in there. And so we're at Gateway Public School right now. This is my first school that I got held back a grade. And okay, sure, nature just loves to love me. And with that said, maybe I can balance this and love her back. And so maybe the attachments is to an underlying fear of separation. Maybe it's to go away or doing without it, and storing sentimental things including weight for comfort. How can overcompensating happen? Overcompensating is in this law of attraction, this electromagnetic way of being into that karmic loop. And so how can overcompensating happen when compensation in itself is an illusion? What is an illusion? Is love an illusion? So held far from the truth. After what is truth? The light. Is it? The awareness that we impress upon and make us real? That is attracted from the frequency that opens up from within our heart. And after every encounter and to release. Breathe that in for a moment. After every encounter and to release. Do you hear the bees? There's beehives everywhere. And as much as the self can to work throughout this day, repeat the following idea. I must release my sentiment from all objects of attachment. I must release my sentiment from all objects of attachment. Can you really mean it? I must release my sentiment from all objects of attachment. So when you look at those objects, anything you feel attachment to, say these words. Look in the mirror and say these words. I must release my sentiment from all objects of attachment, from all these objects of attachment. Shift the perspective to the fusion of its function. What is function? It's your purpose. What is it? It's love and joy. It is what brings me joy. What is my function? And its will, the will, my life force that prefers in this moment in accordance to the way I feel as my guidance, as one, rather than from what the self was holding on to. How is it irrelevant? And with every contribution that it may instead be served. With every contribution that it may be served. Are we feeding on something called expectations? Have we done all this in service to others, like enslavement? What are we owing? Do we have a mortgage? Are we in debt? Do we put ourselves in a situation like that where we have to do these things because we can obtain those objects? Because we're still waiting on the money to come in? And as according to the law of attraction, if we do, then it will come in? Not necessarily. Look at how many people are in debt. So just because I have 19K or something like that in my credit card, does it mean that I go out and buy a car right now and just pay the minimum every month until the money comes rolling in? And when will this money be coming in as expected? You see? Be caring but not concerned. And don't place yourself in situations where you are going to be fish food. The true purpose is to find the inspiration and in its release of creation for creation. So the purpose, this true purpose, is to find the inspiration, or let the inspiration find you, and in its release of creation for creation. So you're releasing all these things like baggage, the weight in your backpack, remove the bricks. So what if they're made in, these bricks are made of gold? Well then, melt them. I don't know. What can you do with them? What are they? What is their value? What can you use them for? If you can't use them for anything, then just let them go, and when the time comes, they will come back again. Or make use of them right here and now. What is it that you can do with them? So, I'm still working on this. I have so much clutter to clear. And yet, you got to stop and think, well, I do everything in moderation. And what is the priority in this moment? Always. What is this function of priority? Always. To feel good. To feel good. And then everything else. And so I must release my sentiment from all objects of attachment. Thank you so very much. And if I was to say, in the oneness, the separation is love and light. So if I'm to say much love and light, what am I promoting? The many? So I am promoting at this moment, during this ascension, that we may make it up there into the oneness, or right here as we are, to accept the oneness. And just, my goodness, how far along we have made it. Come on. Come on. Just look at that for a moment. It's just beautiful. And from one creator being to another, may inspiration be found and open up to enlightenment and self-expression, so that there are no more stuck emotions anywhere to be found. Come right out of the box as creator God beings. And with that said, I do very much love you. Thank you so very much for joining me. Many, many, many blessings.